All right, Lee, thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you doing?
Doing good, just trying to keep afloat with everything that's going on here in Toronto as far as the COVID restrictions starting to loosen and people are now getting more back out to work and stuff like that. So like I got a lot on my plate. The college that I work for as well, that's it's hinting at going on strike. So we're navigating
Oh,
all of that as well. So there's just a lot that's going on and trying to sort of move in harmony with everything so that we don't fall behind.
yeah, fun times, fun times. All right. And it's interesting that you bring up, the college that you work at. And I know that you are, in my opinion, we've spoken in person before about this, one of the people that I've learned the most from in my fitness career. And, there's certain people who really shaped who I was as a trainer and as a coach for many years. And you being one of those people like Mike Robertson, people like, uh, you know, John Russin and that kind of thing. And these are, I'll link to all these different websites in the show notes for anyone listening, because these are great places for anyone, not just coaches, to learn about, fitness and health in general. But my question for you is someone who does so much already, right? As a coach, as, a teacher, as someone who takes care of themselves, why writing? And why do you dedicate so much of your time and what you do to being an actual writer?
I think that first of all, it's a good platform to reach as many people as possible. My allegiance has always been toward the client, or I guess you want to call it the person who is going to be consuming the content, the person who can learn the most from it. And I think that there's a lot of information that's out there already that's geared toward, trainers and, even the conference that we met each other at, that in itself just goes to show how much internal knowledge that there is circulating, how much access to things internally there is for people who are already members of the industry. But there's not, like, I can't think of too many fitness conferences, for example, that cater to strictly general population, right? But what does get consumed by general population a lot more would be your classic fitness magazine, or maybe a popular fitness website and whatnot. So I don't shy away from trying to get myself published in a lot of those places. A, of course, it's going to speak to credibility, but B, because of the fact that it can actually help a great percentage of people who might not have the chance to, afford a trainer, for example, or other things like that. So that's one reason why. There's a few reasons why, to be honest with you. And yeah, it's always something that has been a goal of mine, is to get published, to stay published, to write a lot of content and have evergreen stuff that's out there, so that even if it doesn't get consumed the second that I write or the second that it's released, it gets consumed later on when somebody comes across it or stumbles across it on the internet or whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I was getting at with that question, is like, I feel like in a world right now of instant everything, right? A social media feed that just scrolls by, and, like a post that's 30 seconds and it takes, 10 minutes to make and 30 seconds to view or something like that. That writing is to me, it's such an interesting thing, because I think that writing from the form of like reading, having content in that way that you absorb it, is different than just watching a video. But also in terms of like writing, it's something that I recommend for my clients, for everyone that I work with, in terms of whether it's journaling, whether it's writing about your day, whether it's just writing things down. There's something to me that's like, it's just different than any other way of getting our thoughts out. And especially today, it can feel like, oh, like I interact with people because it's just like I'm social, liking their posts on social media. But I feel like what you've done, and again, for anyone listening, I do agree that your stuff is like evergreen. I've gone back and read posts of yours from the early 2010, 2011, 2012 and stuff like that. And it's all, it still stands the test of time, because there are certain facts about the stuff that we're talking about here when you're talking about health, when you're talking about fitness there. And so like, that kind of takes me to my next question, which is like, so much of this stuff seems to be opinionated, right? But isn't there a level of fact here? Like, why is it that in the fitness space, there's so much bickering when theoretically this is a science?
So this is something that I talk to my students about a lot, actually, and that is making sure you lead by principle versus leading by certain rules or dogma, right? And when you start falling down the rabbit hole of going into the rule-based or dogmatic type of thinking, you run into problems and you start getting into debates with other people. Most all coaches who are worth their salt aren't going to disagree that keeping your heels down when you do a squat is a safe way to go. Most, and if not all, coaches that are worth their salt are going to agree that keeping your knees aligned with your toes when you squat down is going to be a safe way to go compared to other alternatives. And so just thinking about those things and then allowing room for potential variations in patterning, or potential variations in how you implement the squat, or potential variations in what kind of squat you want to use for an individual, just to use squats as an example. That allows you to have a little bit more of an open mind towards the whole industry, and when it comes to other things within the industry too, whether that's program design as a whole, whether that's, nutrition or whatever have you, these things can, this mindset or this way of thinking can really, really be a positive way to go about approaching your career. You're going to get into less fights that way. First of all, the amount of bickering that you say that you have, that you see on the internet, or even in the real world when it comes to the fitness and health world, it's when people start latching on to their ideas of what the best method is. And that's never been something that I've wanted to be a part of. Good coaches are generally going to agree on most of the same principles of training, things like progressive overload to create strength, things like making sure you're in a caloric deficit in order to achieve weight loss, things like that. They go without saying because those are kind of the laws of the game. Right. But as far as, getting into the nitty gritty in terms of, okay, well, this method is going to be the best way in order for you to achieve this particular fringe goal that you might have. This is where people should start really, really taking a step back and thinking bigger picture in order to help the greatest number of people. And, some people might think that I can't go head to head with a lot of science type of people who get into the deep details of things. It's like, well, you'd be surprised. The real truth is I just don't want to. And there's no real benefit that people will really get from doing that. And so we have to remember that if you talk to the next person you see on the street and tell them to point to their lats, they probably won't be able to do that because they don't know what lats are. Right. And so this is the level of understanding that a lot of people who are in the general population have. When we get caught up in the industry and the esoteric details of every piece of exercise science and physiology, and we're talking amongst professionals all the time, we could get caught up, right? And so we got to remember what the learning level and the I guess, for lack of a better term, just the understanding level is for people in the general public, and then adjust things accordingly so that we can help the most people if that's our real goal.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. It can be sort of an echo chamber. And I think that's a big problem. People see this stuff on social media, but it's kind of this thing of like, in reality, when it comes to social media, when it comes to, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, most people are content consumers, not content creators, right? So inherently, if you're like, well, that's all I see on social media, you're talking to the 1% of people who take the time to actually create content. And those type of people are probably the same type of people who are going to go to seminars and who are going to read books. So it's very easy to get caught in this echo chamber. So I'm just saying that for anyone listening to be like, well, like it has to be true because I see it all the time. It's like most people think about yourself, right? If you're listening to this, you're listening to a podcast, you're not recording one, right? Most people are scrolling social media. They're not making a lot of content. So we get caught up thinking like, oh, like this is right. It just happens to be that those are the type of people who tend to make the content because they feel that they have a message worth sharing, which is fine. But, my question is, right, with fitness, it can be, to me, either the simplest thing in the world, right? Squat, bench, push, pull, legs, whatever. Or it can be the most complicated thing in the world, right? Where we're talking about literally how your cells work. And we're talking about the internal rotation and the external rotation and rib cage and spine and stuff like that. And it's like, which one is right? Because you can make an argument for either one.
Yeah, it's a more difficult statement that you just made to unpack a statement like that than meets the eye for a lot of people when you're listening into that. And I can only speak from personal experience when I say that my aim has always been with the things that I put out, the content that I create, the articles that I write, the places I try to get published, the television, whatever it is whatever the medium is, I have always tried to be kind of known or branded, for lack of a better term, as the legit and knowledgeable coach who has a mainstream reach, right? And so being able to have that last part in there, that mainstream reach, means that there's going to be an amount that you have to allow in this world of media that involves watering down some subjects and making things more digestible and making things more accessible and making things a little bit more, fun even. And so being able to strike the balance between still giving a great dose of the science and giving somebody what they need, but sort of making it in a way that makes them understand it first and foremost, and second of all makes them want to do it. That's the real thing. That's the real, like, that's the art of it, right? And so when it comes to all the content, when it's sort of like a polarity where it's one side of the spectrum or the other side of the spectrum, either super duper detailed in the deep depths of science, or way too simplified and like really, really easy, it's about making sure that we can give people the capability of giving them the knowledge that they need, that will keep them safe, that'll keep them working out well, and addressing goals that they might have, and understanding why they want to do it as well. And if you can give them the answers to those, then I think that everybody's laughing. But unfortunately, I do believe that the fitness industry has a little bit of an identity crisis where all this is concerned. Why? And I kind of said this when I was speaking in Florida the other month, and that is, I really believe that a lot of times we might get insecure about the fact that our job might not be taken quite as seriously as other scientists might be taken seriously, or other certain career paths might be taken seriously, and the perfect reference would be like doctors or MDs. A person will be stepping over each other to listen to what a doctor has to say about exercise before they listen to what an exercise professional has to say about exercise, and it doesn't make too much sense, right? So I think that sometimes we feel that we need to compensate by getting even more technical than we necessarily have to create that buy-in for a lot of people, so that people think, oh, this person really knows what they're talking about. And the truth is, I think the culture as a whole, even from the population out there, that needs to just change so that they can understand that one professional has responsibilities that another professional doesn't, and vice versa. And so if you really want help, like, listen, if I had issues with the law, then I would go and see a professional that is dealing with the law, a lawyer. If I had issues with mental health, I would see somebody who's a professional with dealing with mental health. If I had issues with fitness, then I would see a professional who is going to, help me with fitness. So I think that you always have to make sure that you're dealing with the right professional and dealing with a person who has the correct hat to wear. I see a lot of fitness people who are giving advice on, life and life coaching and all this stuff. And it's like, well, that's not your forte. It's not your niche, right? But you're going there with it. And then all of a sudden the lines start getting blurred. And I think that in a way that could subversively kind of deteriorate or cheapen the level at which we could be viewed as a whole, as an industry, because we're doing all this transient stuff where all of a sudden we're jumping into talking about nutrition too much. We're jumping into talking about life coaching too much. We're talking about mental health and all these different things that it's not quite our wheelhouse, and we'd be better to outsource and refer out to it, or we might get too medical with our diagnoses or with the things that we're prescribing or telling people to do. So it's a thin line. It's a fine line to tread. And if we stay in our lanes and think about what I said at the very beginning, which is, mainstream reach, a digestible, accessible information that still keeps to the principles of training, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. And it might mean cutting some of the content out that you're creating, or even cutting out some of the accounts that you might follow on social media if you're a consumer of the stuff. So that would be my pieces of advice where all that's concerned, to hopefully, curb a lot of that stuff that we're seeing out there, of that polarity that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's super important. One, as you just said, if you are the type of, people listening to this, where sometimes you do have to do like an audit on the people that you follow, not just the type of content that you're putting out, but are you following, the type of person who's putting out good content? And it can be hard to discern, but that's partially, one of the many reasons. Again, I've liked your content for a long time, but specifically your Instagram, because you are the definition of exactly what you just said. Stay in your lane, right? So many coaches are a fitness coach, and then a nutrition coach, and then a life coach. And I get it, because I did the same thing. But what I did was actually became a nutrition coach. And then I went and got my license as a board licensed health and wellness coach, because I wanted to be able to speak on these things without speaking out of my turn. And I do think that these are all valuable tools, but people assume that because, we do know that, okay, if fitness has to do with habits. So all of a sudden I'm a fitness coach. So now I just throw habit coach in there or something like that. And then it's just this thing of like, as you said, it kind of just waters everything down, because it's like, well, what even do you do? And everyone wants to be everything, but it's more powerful, I think, to find someone. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, how do I know that I want my coach to help me with everything? But it's like, find someone who does what they do and does it well. And one of the things that you brought up a few times is simply education, right? And like being kind of like a teacher to people. And this is how I've always looked at myself, as whether it was training, whether it was nutrition, whether it was, life coaching. It's like, I look at myself as a teacher, and I'm just here I've done the years of studying, I've done the research, I've trained hundreds and hundreds of clients. So like, I've been there, and now I can kind of speed that process for you. But on the other side of that, I always also think I know there are people who are like, I don't want to learn this stuff. Like that's your job, like, well, I don't care how this stuff works. I just want to know what to do. So how important do you think the education piece is? And is it a necessary piece for whatever people are trying to achieve?
It's important because somebody who needs a little bit more attention than another person, for example, maybe they do have something maybe they're rehabbing from an injury or something like that. Maybe they came off of some kind of a surgery, or maybe they have some other issues that very technical exercise advice might treat them well, or might serve them well, right? So I think that what's important is having the knowledge to be able to deal with certain cases like that, and otherwise being able to kind of like keep it to yourself. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that you can't explain what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing to a certain person. But for the ones who and you can build rapport and find this out fairly easily, who don't necessarily care to learn crazy amounts other than the basics with the fitness things that they're being put through, with the programming that they're going through and whatnot. Where they're more oriented toward just the results that they're getting and making sure they stay safe while they do it, and I guess have a measure of enjoyment while they're doing it as well. Those are the people where you can implement the science, but you don't have to talk about it every 5 seconds, and that's a real skill that some people don't seem to possess, is just being able to scale it back, hold it in, and wear the right hat for the right individual. For the science geek who really has a lot of questions they really want to know and so on, you'll probably know when somebody like that comes around. And so for those people, you can go to town with it. It doesn't mean that their program needs to be any different than what another person's program is, but it just depends on how much time you spend discussing all of the fine details of that program. So I think that it's about, again, striking a balance between figuring out which clients are going to take well to it and which ones aren't, and knowing what hat to wear in what situation.
Yeah. I mean, again, anyone listening to this, you might see a theme, which is just that, like, there's no real one answer for a lot of these things. And it's kind of always finding that balance in between, or that gray area. But that's why I like having these type of conversations, because people start, again, going back to being dogmatic in fitness, or people who are a consumer, or just a regular gym goer, they might think that it's one way, but usually it's not. You can go either way. But a word that you just used that I also, again, you see a lot of times words just put me on tangents, but you said enjoyment. So my question is, from someone who, as yourself, who is I would say a serious guy in the world of fitness, right? You work yourself hard, your clients work hard, you have the physique and the lifestyle to show for it. How important is enjoyment in this thing? And in terms of, if I just say, well, I don't like that stuff, I like doing, I don't know, Barry's boot camp 3 days a week and then going to Zumba, versus like, the result that I'm trying to get, where does enjoyment factor in that whole equation?
So it's another really big question, because there's a kind of like a twofold answer to it. Number one, like, I'm just thinking of my current self right now in this particular moment and where my mind is at with regards to exercise. I've been training very frequently, and I'm in a little bit of a space where, sometimes it's a bit of a drudgery to get going, to just get in there and do the thing. And I got a gym right in my own condo building. I got 5 gym memberships, and so it's not like I have a lack of access to the stuff. But when you've been in the groove for such a long time, or you've been doing something, 5-6 days per week, every week, and so on, after a while, you start sometimes you hit a patch where you're just like, you don't have the mojo for it, and I think that every single person who trains frequently can attest to that and say that they've had periods where it's like that. Maybe you even do take time off. Maybe you do take a couple of weeks where you don't even touch the gym at all and you're just working and that's basically it, right? And nothing wrong with that. But it just speaks to the idea that enjoyment factor is usually the thing that diminishes first when those are the situations that you're in. So even right now, I'm liking my workouts a little bit less than normal and it's going to come back. But right now it's one of those times. And, you couple that with being really busy with work and so on. And these are things that, make a human, right? And so when all of that is considered, thinking about a client who there are different expectations or different things that we have of them and what they would have of us and our whole arrangement here, we got to give a little bit of extra attention toward that. They're trusting us with their money and their time and their bodies, of course, and so if they don't have some factor of enjoyment, something that makes them want to come in, whether it is the way that you communicate with them, whether it is how great of a coach you are in terms of technically correcting them and whatnot, whether it is the toughness of the workouts, anything, it's going to make it tough for you to maintain or keep a client around and keep a client motivated to stick around, right? And so I believe that enjoyment is a huge factor. It is a huge factor. Now, this is all being said without shirking responsibility at the same time, because there are a lot of communities out there in this very same industry that will go ahead and say, well, all of this is completely worthless and useless. Goals don't matter. Strength doesn't. All these things don't matter. Results don't matter. It doesn't matter of any of those things with regards to physical goals. What matters the most is how you feel up here and your enjoyment factor. If you like what you're doing, then that's all that matters. And I think that forfeits a lot of responsibility that somebody might have, especially because it rocks the foundation upon which goals are built. If you don't have any accountability toward the things that you want to work toward or toward your own health and fitness, then you'll never make any sort of progress. And there is some kind of a spectrum that we have to look at fitness on. And if we don't look at it on any form of a spectrum, well, then my job shouldn't really exist. And neither should any other personal trainer or health specialist job. It shouldn't exist. So in summary, I do believe that enjoyment matters and that there should be an aspect of that for sure. And that goes to the most advanced trainees or trainers themselves like myself, where how enjoyment factors into that, like I just explained. And it goes for complete beginners as well, or people who are dependent on a personal trainer or training sessions and whatnot. It matters just as much in terms of the enjoyment factor. And that all is to be taken with a grain of salt, where we say, yeah, you've got to enjoy this, but at the same time, there will be periods of time where, you will have to go the extra mile to make something stay consistent, to make something work, for you to get to the gym, for you to work a little bit harder. And 9 times out of 10, like I trained today, I didn't really want to train. 9 times out of 10, when those kinds of days happen, when you leave, you don't feel worse from doing it, right? And so that's the real take home point, is that once you've done it, it shows that it was worth it. And so if that's the reality of it, and that's the truth of it, then it brings enjoyment into another dimension of what it's all about, right? Because maybe you don't enjoy it back then, but afterwards you're like, man, I enjoy myself for having done that. So there's a little bit of a benefit that way as well. So that should say that there's still a personal responsibility and accountability that should be given to somebody who's got goals and who has, a serious intent toward their training. It's more than just saying, you know what, well, if I'm not enjoying myself today, then I will not train today or tomorrow or next week or next month. And then all of a sudden you're barely even working out at all and you're letting yourself go altogether. So those are the ways to look at it. We've got to think about things with a level head and a balanced mind.
Yeah, I love so much about what you just said there. The last bit, the beginning, there's different pieces. But first off, I say thank you. I appreciate anytime someone gets on here who is a professional in any regards and talks about their struggles. Specifically, you saying, like sometimes I don't feel like working out. Anyone who's listening to this who doesn't know who Lee is, go and look at his Instagram, and I guarantee if someone who doesn't, lift like that or doesn't work out like that, they're going to think like, well, there's no way this guy doesn't live in the gym 7 days a week and love eating barbells for breakfast. But as you just said, there's some days where it just isn't like that. And that's to be expected. And I think that people need to understand this, because fitness, this is why I don't even like the word fitness anymore, because it's just life. Like this is just life. This is it should be a part of your life. And if you are going to live a life and be active and mobile until you die, you have to be fit in some way for the rest of your life. So to think that you're just going to wake up smiling rainbows every day about having to head to the gym in the same way that you can love your job and still not want to go in some days, in the same way that you can love your kids and you still want to tell them to shut up once in a while, right? There's just like, there's a level of this stuff that is not always going to be 100% enjoyable. But to me, that's part of being an adult. And sometimes you have to do the things that you don't want to do. But I am actually, I used to be very much on one camp. Now I kind of lean to that side of like, okay, just enjoy your life and just do whatever it is that you want. But I caveat that with saying that, like, I do think that people say that, they hear that and they're like, oh, well, that means I never have to work out because I don't enjoy working out. But I think that people actually, the human body wants to move. I don't think, I know this, right? We were born and bred to be movers. This is why moving makes us healthier. In the same way of eating food, right? When I have clients who are like, they're like, I just can't stop eating Ben and Jerry's. I tell them to eat more. I'm like, I want you to eat a pint of Ben and Jerry's every day for the next week. And I guarantee the next time I talk to them, they're like, oh my God, I never want to see a pint of Ben and Jerry's again. Because in reality, there's a level of health that the human body does want to have. Like, we have this idea of like, oh, well, if I don't have to work out, then I'm just going to sit around. And like, yes, some people will do that where they kind of just like melt into nothing and become like extremely overweight and extremely out of shape. But in general, like, if you sit for too long, your back hurts. If you don't move, you start. So I think I would hope that most people have a built-in sort of like bumper system, where it's kind of like your body is going to tell you, like, get up and go a little bit, and understand that, as Lee just said, as I just emphasized, that like, it's not always going to be 100, like, okay, I'm ready to get in and go crush it. But we kind of just see that and realize that, like, it's going to come in seasons, and everything in our life comes in seasons like that. So, I'm wondering, from your perspective, being that you've been a coach for so long with yourself, with your clients, how do you get people, yourself is one thing, but how do you get your clients through that slow season, that low motivation, that time where they're just like, maybe they worked out with you for 3 months, the wedding came and went, and they're like, what the hell do I even need this stuff for anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the thing is about that, I sort of will approach it the same way that I approach my own training when these kinds of issues happen and when these kinds of stymies or these kind of hiccups along the road happen. And that is, it doesn't mean that you have to stop training or that you lose the mojo so that you don't even do anything, or that, the enjoyment has to depend on whether or not you work out, period. Well, what about having some variety in, okay, well, you know what? For the next 4 weeks, we're not going to follow any structure at all, but we're still going to train. How about something like that? Where if you've been married to a program for a long time, or multiple programs or systems for a long time, then all of a sudden you can still be under the umbrella of what goal you want to work toward. For example, let's say fat loss or conditioning training. And instead of following this exact protocol, we're just going to do other things, not random, but other things that fall under the umbrella, without having to document it and without having to completely track it, or without having to say, okay, we're going to do 4 sets of 12 reps of this and that. No, we're going to play it kind of by ear a little bit more. And we're going to train more intuitively. And that way you can get a chance to listen to your body even better and, just have some fun along the way. You enjoy things. Maybe you never had room in your program or in the structure that you were following to implement something that you really like doing for a while. And maybe it's been 2-3 months since you've even been able to touch that exercise because it doesn't really fit into what your plan is. Well, maybe this way it could. And so all of a sudden it reinvigorates you and gets you more excited about certain things because you have something different that you're working on. And that's one method that I like to use a lot, is just straying a little bit from the program, playing around a little bit with programming and whatnot, or with a structure, in order to reignite the fire, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate when you say things like that, because I always love like contrarian views of like, again, I feel like a lot of people hear like, oh, well, this, you're a coach and you train people, so it has to be 8-week programs and tapered periodizations and stuff like that. And you saying like, well, what if we just took some time to just play around and have fun? I think that's always powerful for people to hear. So my next question is then, what is something that you've seen, working in the big box gym setting for as long as you can? I worked at a big box gym for almost 10 years, that you see people get wrong a lot, like assumptions that people have about this, about how it's going to look or how it has to look or how it quote unquote should look, that you're just like, no, that's just not how it is.
When it comes to like in the fitness culture as a whole, I guess, so something that I see in box gyms a lot, or people's expectations, I think that the most common thing that I think that a lot of beginners or novice lifters or people who are going to hire a coach or thinking about hiring a coach, something they might fear the most is a lot of judgment from their coach when they're getting started. You'll hear that common phrase that gets thrown around a lot. I'm just gonna get myself in shape a little bit more, and then I'm gonna hire a coach, or I'm gonna work with you, but I got to get a little fitter first, or whatever. And things like that's like nails on a chalkboard to most trainers, because like, well, that's what we are here for. And so if you need the help, there's no point in delaying that process or thinking that there's a certain minimum requisite fitness level that you have to present to me before you can start working out. It's ridiculous. It really is. And you can think about that in any other light, and it's as ridiculous as it sounds. Like I got to get a job, but I'm going to make some money first before I get a job. Well, it doesn't make sense, right? So if you think about that and you start applying this back to fitness and so on, it's like, when you go to the doctor, and let's say that you're out of shape or whatever it is, or you have an issue. Let's say you have some kind of a medical issue, and they say, okay, I got to see, let me see, whatever the thing is, right? And that thing is not the norm, what it's supposed to be. What are you going to not show them? No, they're the doc, and you know that you got to show it to them. And the doc has seen 10 million such cases before. So they're not showing any judgment. Their allegiance is toward fixing the problem or helping with the problem and giving you the attention that you need. So likewise, with trainers, like what I think that I can speak for pretty much anybody that I associate with as far as the fitness industry goes, when I say the only thing that we care about, whatever size you are, whatever health level you are, whatever fitness level you are, whatever age you are, anything, gender, it's how much effort you're willing to put in. And not only how much effort you're willing to put in, but how devoted you are to the long-term gains or to the long goal, right? So how committed you are to the process. So it's not like you're going to show up once every 3 weeks and put in all the effort. No. Are you willing to remain consistent while you go through this process? Because if you've got that buy-in, then we're going to buy into you even more as well. So that's the only thing that we're going to judge, is how committed you are to the process. And that's going to make us do our job so much more easily and so much better and help you out. But as far as like, any judgment otherwise that somebody will assume a trainer is going to have, we're going to be laughing at them behind their backs or anything like that, doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. And we're not in this industry for that reason at all. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah, 100%. That is, I was laughing as you're saying this because I've heard that so many times, and it's always like, it's so backwards. It's like, I'm gonna work out a little before I hire a trainer. It's like, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose, or like, that's the whole reason I'm here. And it's exactly as you said, right? You wouldn't say, I'm gonna get healthy before I go to the doctor, or like anything else like that. And another thing, when you spoke about like, trainers aren't judging you, but I want to just kind of expand on that a little and say, for anyone listening, no one is judging you. And I did an entire episode about this. I'll link to it in the show notes, literally called No One Cares About You. And it's basically, in that episode, I just talked about the fact that everyone has this idea, especially people who are new to the gym. They're like, oh my God, everyone's watching me. Everyone's looking at me. They all know that I have no clue what I'm doing. And my basic point in that episode was that, like, no one cares. They're all looking at themselves. They're staring at the mirrors. They're staring at their own biceps. They have their big Beats headphones on. They're listening. They're in their own world. They probably don't even know you exist. You could be working out right next to them. Their sweat is dripping on you and they don't even know you're there. So it's just like, we have these expectations of things like people, again, that we are the center of attention, but almost never is that the case. And then also we have this weird expectation of the quote unquote shoulds, right? I should know how to do this, right? That embarrassment comes from the fact that, like, well, I don't know how to do anything, and I should know how to squat already. But that's not the case, because we were never ever taught this stuff. So I appreciate you like putting that out there about, how like that's not really how people think, especially professionals, especially trainers. And that's one of the things that I appreciate the most about you, is how like just upfront and honest that you are. You're like, no, people think that it's like this way, but in reality, it's like this. And in your social media, in your writing, especially. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to ask you about today, Lee, is aside from the fitness stuff, right? Like, just taking a step back from that, how do you personally find the confidence to so wholly be yourself and have your own voice in your writing and your social media to you get what I'm saying? To like, there's so much influence out there to want to bend people and like, no, just say, stay in your lane or whatever it is. But like, you always have the confidence to be like, I know what I know, and I'm going to speak it because where does that come from?
I think that from the very beginning, whenever I started a WordPress website back in like 2010 myself, I think that part of it was probably 2009 actually. Anyway, part of it was that I was always after kind of the slow trickle of, I guess, notoriety or any sort of like positive response or any sort of like recognition of any sort in terms of a career trajectory where my work is concerned. And because my idea or my goal was to have that slow trickle, and I didn't want to like peak early, for lack of a better term. I just wanted to make sure that everything happened when it was supposed to happen. And so for that reason, it allowed me to sort of pay less attention to things like, let's say, releasing a product too early, or trying to make money off of people prematurely or for no real reason, or for something that's gimmicky or something that's very, very quick, right? I was more concerned with, okay, I'm going to keep training my clients, put my head down, keep doing what I'm doing, create the content that I'm creating, and it's going to give me a little bit more of an area that I can breathe, exhale, and just say what I have to say and let that content be evergreen. So that's always been kind of the goal. That's been always where my aim has been. And from there, it just makes it a lot easier because you don't have to be preoccupied with too much stuff. And it doesn't allow me to, or sorry, it doesn't really, I don't have the option to now sort of align with a whole bunch of other schools of thought, or not be myself, I guess. I shouldn't say align with those other schools of thought, because I do that all the time. But more so, it disallows me from not being myself, right? And when I have that content, like for example, with the blog stuff, like because you've mentioned this already in this talk, with the blog stuff that I have on my website, if you go through the last 10 years of blog content, which is all there on my site, you'll find that 98% of that content is not blog content that has to do with how to be a better squatter or a better lifter, or how to burn fat faster, or how to build muscle faster, or anything like that. I use the blog to talk about things that I see in the fitness industry, in the socio-cultural aspect of fitness, in the community of fitness, things that can affect the culture of it, things how the culture of fitness can affect the common folk, and so on. I talk about stuff that I see, and early on, that stuff didn't get much of any traction because it was pretty unlikely to see coming from a fitness writer, for somebody who's a fitness expert, talking about just like general stuff in fitness. And that's where I wanted to go with it. And so after, I just didn't quit doing that, and I didn't release stuff every week or anything like that. But the times that I did, I wanted to make sure that it was some kind of a thought-provoking topic that allows people to expand their horizons in terms of how they view this stuff, or look at some kind of an alternate opinion that might be a little bit, at least by title, controversial, or something that is counterintuitive to the normal way of thinking about this stuff. And so then hopefully that kind of builds more traction. And over time, people start knowing you for that sort of stuff. And maybe over time, maybe by this time when I'm 30, or this time when I'm 35, which I am now, people recognize your stuff and recognize your style and recognize that this is who you are and what you're about. And so that was my goal, and that's been successful to this point. And I maintain, and I think that it's something that I continue to want to do. And it allows you to not have too much content that you have to recycle either, because you'll always be thinking of new things to talk about based on your experiences and the things that you see in the industry, conversations that you'll have in the industry, and it's gone well.
Yeah, I think that this is why I like questions like that, because I'm always relating things and analogizing. I don't know what the word is, but things are analogous for one another, right? So like what you just said, right? You started 10, probably more than that, years ago, right? At this point, and with the long game in mind, right? You're like, I'm not trying to make a flash in the pan, buzzy article. I'm trying to make stuff that is just going to be the truth forever. And the long game is everything. That's fitness, that's health, that's, if that people come into this thing of like, I just need to the quick fix. But if I come into things thinking about the long game, that's how I achieve real, actual success. And then also the fact that you were so committed to a goal at that point is what allowed you to commit to the long game, right? Because you said, I had the goal of, kind of coming in and speaking about these different topics that maybe weren't the most popular at the time, but I knew that that was my goal. And because of that, it wasn't about the specific, like what the one article does or what one per mission. Hello. So yeah, sorry about the you had the one mission, right, which kind of allows people to, you would allow you to stay on that path. And this is why having a why of what the point is. And this is why, again, why I just like health and fitness as an analogy of life, where it's like, if my thing is like, I need to look good for the summer, or just like, I need to have abs or something, it's like, okay, that's a very fleeting thing. But if the thing is like, I just want to be healthy and fit for the rest of my life so that I can interact and be a part of my life for my kids' life and my grandkids' life at a bigger, because I've taken that real goal and latched onto it from the beginning, it makes every decision after that much easier, right? Like that becomes the filter through which everything else then passes, right? So for you, it was like you said, like, I want to be a writer who is writing things that will help people forever. And because of that, it made, I'm sure, deciding on what to write, it made, turning down or saying yes to certain opportunities a little bit easier. So I'm wondering how, like, that kind of guided you, and what you've seen, like looking back with hindsight now, is that something that you've ever thought about, and like how it's changed your trajectory of your career?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I think that the opinions that I talk about in my blogs, especially, they definitely, I think that I want to say, potentiated a little bit more interviews like these ones, even. I remember one of my blog articles it made for a TV spot after the company Reddit, what's it called? The network Reddit. And so like things like that, I think that because the subject level or the subject matter is not as, hackneyed as here's 6 ways to improve your squat or whatever. Since it's not that like trite, I think that it's worked in my favor, because there were less people who were out there like myself doing that, right? Or to choosing those kinds of subjects. And so it makes for a little bit more content that provokes people, that gets people interested a little bit, and it's worth the read. And so from that, it just emboldens me to keep on doing that, and keep on searching for more subject matter like that, because it is stuff that is on people's minds that people might not necessarily know how to articulate, or that people might not be too confident to speak about, right? And so what I try to do with every blog article that I write, when I tackle these kinds of subjects, is I always try to at least take a period of it to examine as many sides of the argument as there could possibly be. So it's not just this is my opinion, but also here's the little paragraph or subheading of devil's advocate, where I'm hearing exactly what everybody might have to say about this, and maybe even validating some of those points, but still staying with what my overall theme is with the talk, right? And I think that an offshoot of one of these things, that these articles are quite verbose, and they're quite editorial in nature. And so it helps me refine my writing skills as well, just in general. The fact that I can get away from talking about terminology, or talking about biomechanics, or talking about coaching and cueing, and putting that in writing, and instead just being able to put down 2,000 or 2,500 words of just straight up prose, 2,500 words of just content, of editorial content, of just like an essay format. I like that, because it really helps me sort of hone in on my craft, and it keeps me it keeps me enjoying it too.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why, I started off with this question about why writing, because I think, again, writing is so powerful for anyone. I think that it's a great thing to help just work through your thoughts, right? Most people, we have no way to just get our thoughts out. This is why I like podcasting. This is why I like writing, because it's just like, most people are just stuck with their thoughts in their head all the time. So for you to get to write all these articles for years and years and years, it's just like, it's an amazing thing. So I encourage people to, maybe start some type of journal practice, or, write a blog, even if you never send it to anyone or never actually publish it. And I appreciate all of what you've done, because it's laid a foundation for literally over a decade that anyone can now go through. So again, I encourage anyone listening to go, check out Lee's blog, which I will link to. But my final question here is one that I ask all of my guests. And that's simply, you've written, again, hundreds, if not thousands of articles. You've done talks, you've done everything under the sun to help people. So if you had one piece of actionable advice, I always say a piece of an action step that listeners can take right now today, as soon as they take their headphones out of their ears, as soon as this podcast is over, to start living a healthier, happier life, what would it be?
I have two. The first one would be get more sleep for sure. So most people are they're under the number that they should be reaching for when it comes to sleep. And it's such a pivotal point of attaining whatever goals that you have when it comes to the stuff in the gym. So like even spoken personally, before the pandemic, I was working a lot, I was training a lot, and I was doing what I could with nutrition anyway. And then like I said to myself, you know what, I want to get a little bit leaner. I want to lean out, and I want to take this seriously. When the pandemic hit, I had an empty gym and I had no clients at 6 and 6:30 a.m. and stuff like that. So I could actually sleep in till whatever it is. Let's say I sleep from 11 till 7. Then all of a sudden I wake up, go to the gym, empty gym, open the door, unlock it, turn on the lights myself. I'm all alone in the space at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I just work out for 90 minutes, maybe even 2 hours sometimes, have great workout. I have the energy to repeat that cycle. And all of a sudden I'm seeing results coming that I didn't have before, right? And it's not that my training frequency went up, because it didn't. And my duration may be increased by maybe 10 or 15%, but what really made the difference was recovery, right? Recovery coupled with good nutrition, and that really, really helped me out. The second piece of advice has to do with less about like the actual physical act of being in the gym or some kind of training tip, and it has to do with social media and the internet as a whole, because it can be a very pernicious thing if people let it get to them and consume their lives. So I would say go through your list of people who you follow, and that might include me, who knows? But make some unfollows, and clear up your space. I don't even understand how people might follow like 3,000 different accounts and stuff like that. I don't get that. It's really funny to me. But if you are somebody who has a lot of content coming through your newsfeed all the time, maybe you follow like 300 fitness accounts, and I'm sure that a lot of them are really good. But do you need all of that advice at the same time every single day? Or maybe do you only need half of that? Do you even less than that? Maybe that's the real answer for you, right? So I think that a smart thing for a lot of people to do, just to reduce the amount of clutter in your news feed, even if there's stuff that's off topic, if you're talking about fitness, if there's stuff off topic that you don't need around, get rid of it. I mean, maybe you could reassess later on, but for the time being, it's going to help clear your mind. It's going to help keep you focused on other things, and you're going to be good for it. So I would recommend that for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously the sleep one is huge, but I really like that second point about, I say this all the time about doing like an audit on your social media, because this is your environment. I talk a lot about environment, right? And we can talk about your environment, your physical environment that you're in your gym, but your phone is now part of your environment too. And it's where you spend probably the most time. So I actually did that for a while ago. I went and just unfollowed so many like fitness accounts where it's just like, I don't need to see you bench pressing. I don't need to see like, you're not giving me anything like actually beneficial, where I'm not learning anything. And I think that people also get stuck in this loop of like, they're following accounts like this, whether it's a fitness account or like a foodie account, or like a girl showing off her, like whatever, what I eat in a day thing. And it's like, they conflate that with actual education, where it's like, no, how about take those 15 minutes that you had been scrolling and go read a blog, like actual read real information, and you will learn so much more and be so much better off. Obviously it's not as fun. It doesn't give you those fun little dopamine hits, but like that's something that I think is a much better use of people's time. And, there's so much information out there, but it's about being a conscious consumer rather than just kind of like letting this stuff float by you at 100 posts per minute or something like that. So I really appreciate that tip for people. I think that will be great. So the last thing I just wanted to ask you, Lee, I'm sure people are going to want to learn from you. Again, I'm going to link to your blog and everything else that you have in the show notes, but where can people find you? Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
The website containing all the blogs I've been talking about and so on is leeboyce.com. So that's real easy. I actually just got that redesigned, so it looks pretty fresh right now. So that's a good one to hit up. And from there, or just as a cold search, you can search me at Coach Lee Boyce for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So I'm all there for that. And those are the 3 forms of social media, which is more than enough for me. I don't need much more than that. So that's where you can find me. I'm usually posting stuff on Facebook Facebook's probably the least frequent now because Instagram's kind of taken over. So I'm posting stuff on Facebook though each week. I'm posting stuff on Instagram each day, and that's usually 2 posts a day on the weekdays, and I try to get at least one a day on the weekends. So there's all sorts of educational content there, and updates on articles that I've gotten published and whatnot. You'll see that all through all 3 forms of social media. And Twitter, I'm making tweets all the time. The occasional movie review, but mostly tweets there. So about fitness content. So by all means, check all 3 out, and don't think you'll be disappointed if you're looking for a good ongoing source of information.
Yeah, I encourage anyone to check out your stuff as well. Again, I've followed for years, and I do. You're one of the few accounts that I do enjoy following. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, man. It's great.